Buenas noches, Horror Sapiens. Hoy tenemos un invitado de lujísimo, estrella de rock, actor con más de 61 personajes bajo el brazo. A lo mejor a los que les gusta el cine independiente lo han visto en A Ghost Story, A Desert, Los River, Decay. A lo mejor lo han visto en Fallout, Lady Dynamite, Glow, Comedy Bang Bang. A lo mejor lo conocen por su trabajo de magia, a lo mejor lo vieron en Penn and Teller. Lo que sí es que es una voz única. Vamos, es que por dónde empezar a hablar con este hombre, uno de los artistas más completos que se puedan imaginar. Eh, ha sido cantante, ha sido músico, ha hecho actuación, es un bailarín espléndido. Bueno, lo tiene de todo. Él ha cautivado auditorios desde Tokio hasta Nueva York. eh, ha estado también con 7 premios de la Academia de Artes Mágicas en el Magic Castle. En este lugar también, en la sala de Houdini, desde hace 16 años. Él tiene séances invocando ahí espíritus macabros. Él también es responsable de The Zabrecky Hour y van a encontrar a lo largo del programa, cuando haga yo así, van a ver links al trabajo de Rob Zabrecky. Rob Zabrecky, welcome to the show. So happy to finally have you around here. And God, where to start? I mean, you are such a complete artist because you were a singer. You play what instruments do you play, by the way?
I play, I think my main instrument would have been the electric bass guitar, but I do play a little bit of a stand-up bass, some guitar, minimal drums and piano and some singing. So, not any of them particularly well, but I was able to communicate through them different ways.
Okay, and so a rock star. You had Possum Dixon. Then, how did you came to all of this? Because obviously your time as a rock star gave you a lot of elements that we can see in your confidence on stage. Because God, you do everything, and you're very talented. But not only talented, you really put your heart, your mind, your creativity. You're very focused. There's so many things I want to ask you that I rather have you uh, telling us about yourself. And please go ahead.
Well, thank you. It sounds like I've done a lot, and I maybe at this point, I have, but it certainly didn't start that way. I was a kid with a single dream of I love music growing up, and I just thought I was going to be a musician uh, my whole life. That was my single and only dream, and I pursued that as a teenager, and by my early 20s, got a band together, and so for 10 years, had a band. And when that dream kind of expired, uh, other art forms started to present themselves, and I've been engaging them on an as wanted, needed basis ever since.
And how did you fall into Magic's lap? Or what happened there? How did you transition?
Well, it was by surprise, really. I had this band, and I was Possum Dixon, and I was on tour in the mid '90s in Baltimore, Maryland. And one afternoon, we loaded our music gear into a nightclub and went strolling around sightseeing in Baltimore. And it was a hot afternoon. It was a sunny summer afternoon. And so I dipped into a magic shop because it had an air conditioner, and wandered inside, looked around, felt guilty for not buying something, a trick of some sort, as you might buy like you know, a bagel or something in a bakery if you're, dipped in to use the restroom or something. So anyhow, I bought a trick, and I performed it that night on stage very poorly for a group of indie rockers, and it just sparked. It spoke to the audience. I got a kick out of doing it. The next night we were in New York City. I performed said trick again. Similar effects. It was curious and interesting and exciting. Unlike my music career, that was sort of on the um, I don't know, kind of on the decline, I would say, having done it for 10 years and lived through it. I was kind of happy to let go of that and just became obsessed with magic like I did with music. And I live in LA. There's a wonderful place here called the Magic Castle. There's a real community surrounding it. And I dove into that. Along with my wife, we sort of been on this journey together. She was my girlfriend back then. And now 30 years later, we're still finding ourselves amidst this interesting sort of subculture that's happening in Hollywood with the Magic Castle and its world, and just become a part of our lives now. It's funny how one thing in life just one little moment just changed everything. So, or to anybody out there, embrace new things, you know.
And also, I wanted to ask you, because your on-stage persona is mind-blowing. You have a lot of elements related to bizarre magic. You're very dark on stage. There is something, how can I say, intriguing, but at the same time, fascinating. How did you build your persona for stage?
Well, thanks. That's a really nice description of the character that I think I refer to it sometimes as odd man. He's a bit of an outsider from what the normal world sees, and it was built over time, like slowly, and I think when I was realizing that magic is an art form and you can really write yourself into a trick or a piece or performance, I just started to really think about what was important, elements of vintage horror movies, which I liked, and silent film, and elements of dada and punk rock, and all these sort of different ideas about self-expression, and kind of weaving these things into a narrative using magic tricks was really kind of it just felt natural, and it seemed like the right thing to do, and it still kind of does. But that's really it, and it's developed over time. It's something that didn't just come out of the box. It was these very slow increments. It wasn't like I came out and I was great at performing magic automatically. I wasn't. I was very clumsy, and I didn't have the skill and technical ability that a lot of magicians had, that's growing up doing magic. So coming to it later, I took more of a sort of a crude approach, and still probably am not the most technical performer, but I do try to find material that's a little more intricate and advanced as I'm moving through the art form, and find different methods to do things, and really trying to find new ways to write myself into the act. It's always evolving, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, it's just like a sculpture. Like one starts with an idea, and you start chiseling back and forth, and trying to polish it in the best way possible. Is there any ritual or something you do before going on stage?
Absolutely, yes. I've got a few words that I say to myself. I usually get very close to a wall or a curtain, and I just kind of blast out a few words that no need to mention them here, but they do help me get into a zone and into a
Your
mode.
enchantment.
Yeah, something like that. Because I think really with unlike music that was just having a band is it's easy. You're with your friends, and there's it's more of a um, communal effort. When you're kind of coming up with other people. With magic, you're stepping on the stage alone. So you've got, and with me, especially performing like a character or a persona, I need to climb into that world and step into the skin of that right before I walk on stage. And so I definitely take a nice beat, and this is whether I'm performing a close-up set, impromptu, or a 1,000-seat theater venue or whatever. It's all the same, because I feel like it really is a role in a lot of ways.
Regarding your creative process, because you know what you want to do on stage, the things that you want to uh, explore, to produce in the audience, the innovation that you have, is there like a personal formula that you have? Like, I don't know, I want to produce this effect on the audience, I am going to do things in this particular way.
Oh, definitely. I mean, magic is a art form where you can write, produce, direct, and act. You have so much control over what you want to do, how you want to make the audience feel, how you want to feel visually, what you're presenting. I mean, it's really it's a blank canvas. And so for me, it's a question of, well, what do I want with this? Because I have a lot of material at this point, so I'm able to sort of weave my performances and like, okay, what are the what are the points here I want to project? Is it something about talking about the moon, or is it something where I want to talk about, the existential crisis of being alive, or just something very simple and fun, like I'm going to do a dance for you, maybe make you laugh. So I really try to balance my performances with from an architectural standpoint of flows and peaks and valleys and things like that. And there are these puzzle pieces, quilt pieces, and we weave them together, and hopefully when you look at the bigger picture, you walk away from it feeling like you've been on a bit of a ride or something. I think it's always been a goal. And I think I did that with music too. When you're writing out a set list, you're like, okay, well, start with some banger song to kick it off, and then do a few of those, and then maybe dip down into something that's a little more moody or something. And then, just throw a cover in to, bring in a melancholy vibe or something. So, I mean, I've always been conscious of that stuff, and that's kind of been the focal point of my life is, creating and producing and performing. So I obsess on it a little bit, a lot.
And where did the idea of having the seances came from? I saw one with you and Jack Black trying to summon Kurt Cobain. It was like great idea, great idea. But how did that start happening?
Well, my interest in science goes back about 20 years now. Being a member at the Magic Castle, my wife and I would go up and attend. There's a big Victorian style seance that they've been presenting at the Magic Castle since the late 1960s. And it's always to conjure the spirit of Harry Houdini, who was a staunch, he hated the spiritualists, and he was always trying to bring them down. He didn't believe in seances. He thought they were all, crooks performing magic tricks to contact people that were lost in the war and things for money. So he just saw this as a terrible, low level way to make a living. You see so he decided to bring these mediums down, and in the process, he brought a lot of them to light, and it became very had public feuds with mediums and spiritualists, and it was a real fascinating time in American history. So by attending a few seances, I wanted to know more about them, and we started to really kind of get into that world. And of course, those old pictures of the mediums with the ectoplasm coming out of their mouths and sitting at these tables are just so fascinating. And because it was the 20s, although they were making silent films at that time, there's no real film of seances, especially because a lot of these things took place in the dark, so you don't really have a real document of them. So everything kind of lives in your mind off of a written page. And so again, just another obsession. This magic was an obsession. These seances became an obsession, and I became a backup medium for Magic Castle. I kind of pitched myself to the man who'd been performing them since 1983, and eventually he kind of took me under his wing, and had a really kind of beautiful transition when he moved away from performing them to kind of passing on the baton to me to be the custodian of running that room up there for this period of time. And so I've had a chance to perform hundreds of these seances. And when you perform a seance, it's in a live room. You're with people. People aren't taking pictures. They're not documenting this in any way. So it's an ephemeral art form, right? So people kind of come and go, and they remember these things. And at some point, it seemed like a good idea to create a video version of what a seance could be. And that's when I started to weave in the idea of what this could look like and how it could look and what music could we bring into this. And so when you, again, writing, producing, directing, and acting with a team, and I didn't do this alone. I worked with some really talented people. We did 13 episodes it's called Other Side with Zabrecky, is the show you were referring to. And the idea was to bring a guest into my living room. Actually, where we're sitting right now is Jack was sitting right here. In fact, and all the episodes, they took place on this very sofa. And the idea was to bring a guest into my house, and they could contact a spirit of their choice, and then all hell would break loose, and there would be some kind of a seance, and then we'd come back, and that would be it. And so the idea of making a video version of that was um, interesting because I knew that I could sort of hit the funny bone and bring in aspects of like absurd comedy and musical choices that might be a little unorthodox. So I used a lot of music from a obscure group from LA from the early 1980s called Monitor, and they have their music to me is very supernatural and takes me to a really distant place. And so I really connected with their music and wove that into it. And I made sure the guests that I invited were people that I knew and were friendly with, and which made it, kind of a comfortable but awkward setting to, contact the dead. And that's really how it came out. And we did 13 episodes, and it was a lot of fun. And originally, we pitched it to a bunch of television networks. All of them thought we were nuts and couldn't understand the idea of it. So it became, in some ways, better because we had control over this. I think, when you work with, TV networks, you've got people butting in creatively and telling you that, oh, you got to use this fonts and you got to use this music and stuff like that. So I didn't really want to have to share uh, or I didn't want to have to sort of, collaborate in that way with people that were going to make decisions about it anyway. So it really worked out for the best. And I look back on those little episodes with a lot of pride and fondness because it was all sort of me and my creative team of friends, and Tommy, again, my wife, who I mentioned, helped create the show and the look of it and everything, and it's kind of designed all of this, and it was a blast.
And the thing about the seances, the experience, because watching you on stage, everything has to do with this meaningful experience. There is like making reality real or making fantasy real. I don't know how to place the idea.
Well, thank you. The idea, it is a fantasy. I mean, because I sort of aim to create a character that's on the outside of the world. He doesn't come from this world. He's from some other weird place. So it is a fantasy, and when you have a character like this, you can look at people a little closer, and you're the weird one. I'm normal. I call it
You're the boy next door.
right. I'm the straight guy in my mind, and you are batshit crazy, and
Mhm.
that's how it works. So in other words, the prettiest woman or the most handsome man to me is just, oh my goodness, how did they let this person out of the house? It's similar with what the Munsters did. Herman Munster and
Mhm.
they're on Mockingbird Lane, and they thought they had this, perfect Norman Rockwell existence, and their niece was,
Marilyn.
yeah, Marilyn, who
Yeah.
had this Jane Mansfield or Marilyn Monroe vibe, was like, oh God, we feel she's so unfortunate. We're so sorry to like have to deal with her and her weird,
Poor girl.
yeah, the poor girl. And so that to me was just that once that idea solidified, and I realized that that's how this was going to work, I started to connect with audiences in a really fun way, and that of course helps. Um, it helps with material choices, with picking music, with sort of choosing costume and wardrobe and everything. Let me just silence my phone. It's getting a little annoying here. One second. One moment, please. There we go. So anyhow, that's the kind of the origin and the genesis of what's my creative life and seances and magic and things like that.
Uh, I have the feeling that you've looked quite through going through a lot of bizarre magic books. I mean, sometimes I see you and I start thinking about Eugene Burger for some strange reason. Uh, am I wrong?
Oh, certainly not. Eugene Burger to me is dear, dear, dear to my heart in the same way that Lou Reed was dear to my heart as a musician. Eugene from day one getting into magic was, first of all, I knew him through his work. I didn't know him for the first handful of years, but devoured everything that he had written, as well as Max Maven. Max was another person in the sort of bizarre realm, and Tony Andruzzi, who I never got to meet, big magic, bizarre magic guy. He passed before I fell into the art form. But Eugene and Max were such big influences, and Eugene's book Spirit Theater was just a massive influence. It was like a Beatles record or something. You just go, man, this thing is like, it's there's so much gold here, and you can go back and reread it and find new things, and it's always just so incredible that he left so many great gifts behind. He was also a very gentle performer, and although he was strange and he had that that beard and he sort of looked like he had that sort of foreboding vibe. He was a sweet, you walked through his performances and there was something very empathetic and sweet about this man too, that you didn't feel like you were just experiencing just creepy, because if you did that, if you keep hitting that one note, and this is true for any horror movie or television show or painting, it's you're not gonna there's got to be um, some variation and some room to play around with in that space, and Eugene did that really really well, I think. I have 3 dogs. I think you've seen them all now. They're like,
Well, they want to be a part of this. I don't blame them.
oh, they
No,
are.
and also talking about Master Burger, because he's a master, uh, his voice,
Yeah.
his voice. Do you do something with your voice on stage?
No, and I don't. I'm naturally soft spoken. I Depending on the room I'm talking to, I'll project. I always try to talk to the back wall, but it's more of a stepping into the character. There's a clarity that he has, or else I might slow down the metronome just a little bit, as I'm maybe right here. He's
Yeah,
maybe,
your pace is amazing.
thank you. It's something I maybe from being a musician that I'm conscious of, but I try to make every beat and every sort of thing kind of count in its own ways. And I think sometimes pauses and even elongated pauses can be as good as throwing in a bunch of words that are meaningless. If the silence can be just as important as any written word, in my opinion.
Any bizarre magic other activities that you have besides the senses and the elements that you incorporate? Because I've seen you with the scissors on stage, just going with the scissors all around your face, and and that's quite something. It's very daring. Where do you put a stop, and I can go up to this point and not
Oh
go
yeah.
further?
Well, that's a good question. I'm always I'm always pushing those envelopes, and uh that's a good question. I don't know. There's just something inside you that says go further. The deeper you go, the more gratifying it feels. Um, there is a point probably where you can get too weird. So in other words, when I perform the seances, the Magic Castle, I'm walking into a dining room that
Mhm.
seats 12, 13 people. And I know that if I go in there too sort of headstrong with this character of mine, it's going to be over the top. People are going to think they're sitting with a cartoon, you see. So there's got to be something very engaging about, talking to somebody on a kind of a quiet level, and creating sort of small relationships along the way. And I think that is the way to do it in those small environments, to be a little more direct and to, letting people understand that you are a human being, right? Hey, quiet. Um, on stage, when you've got lights hitting you and sound cues, you can become a little more animated, and I think there's more room for that kind of, that growth and that expansion of character or persona. But so I adjust, you see, to each group. If I know if I'm doing something one-on-one with someone, I've done many experiences where it's just been a one-on-one experience. If you're so crazy and strange and weird, you're not going to connect, because they're going to, people might have issues with mental health or whatever, and their own experience, like, oh, I have a crazy brother and this guy reminds me of him, it's too much, I have to go, or whatever. See, there's a inner gauge that I sort of apply for each scenario, each performance. It's tricky, but it's also innate, so I think I've got the ability to kind of read people in some ways, and I'm not terrible at it.
Yeah, just checking out with the audience because some of them want blood, to say it
Right.
somehow. And some others are like, maybe I should just go down a couple pegs there. And and because it's all a construction. I once saw Taylor do this thing where he was swallowing razor blades and then just putting them out with a little string. And I was like, whoa, that would be like an extreme, particularly because we see Taylor and he looks like so soft and so almost fragile. And he's a badass. So would you ever do something as daring? Because nowadays we have a lot of problems with all the cancel culture and don't do this because people will replicate it or whatever. What are your thoughts around this?
Well, I mean, yeah, we are definitely more than ever living in a world where we're all under a microscope, and if you say one wrong word, you're going to be, kicked out of X, Y, or Z, culture, club, whatever is going on. So yeah, I'm aware of that, and I think I try not to let that affect too much of what I'm trying to write, or if I've got something I'm trying to convey, um, that you know I might try to tweak something to still get the point across, but make sure that I'm not doing something that's going to really offend or hurt somebody. Um, by nature, what I do is going to offend some people because it's off-putting and it's not warm and fuzzy all the time, and it's like it can be sort of jarring at times, and that's fine. And I know my father taught me at a young age that, as he'd say to me, my boy, not everyone's going to like you. Get used to it.
Mhm.
And at first, many years I was like, what is he talking about? And then now, later on in life, I realized what a gift that was, and that, yeah, and that's fine. I don't want everyone to like me. I realized that like I've got a sort of a niche thing going on, and I'm going to connect with a certain type of group, a certain type of audience, and I don't need or want to I don't need the love of the world. I know what I'm doing feels good to me, and I write sometime from the deepest parts of my heart that I'm trying to express happiness or sadness or fear or anger or love or disparity or some idea about existentialism and why we're here on this planet and what all this what does the human existence mean, what is all this about, but refine it in a way that I can perform it for teenage kids or an 80-year-old couple from Africa or whatever. You want to be able to sort of like tell your stories in ways that are palatable for a wider audience. And I despite all this, I am always trying to find a wider audience. I don't it's not my goal in life to be a underground crusader and a legend in the underground. Like that's never been a goal. I've just always tried to find my audience, whoever, wherever they are. And as I get a little bit older, I realize that I'm categorized in certain, fields. As of course, being here today with you is a perfect indicator that I've connected with, horror and bizarre magic and sort of those realms, which is amazing, and I'm thrilled about that. And I anytime I get to talk about people like Eugene Burger or how I helped create a show or something is it's amazing. So it feels really good, to share, to be a storyteller and share what I'm doing.
What has been the magic performance that you saw that I mean it really blew your mind that you were inside yourself like how was it done? I want to get this done. How is it? What happened here?
Oh, that's a good question, and it's kind of like uh, akin to like what's your favorite song or what's the song that changed your life? And for me, I've never been like the Beatles or a Stones person. I like so many different things, and I'm always gonna have a wide interest in whatever I'm diving into. And so for magic, there's several things that I've seen. Primarily, something that's jumping to mind is a performance from Teller when he performed Shadows, a signature piece, which you see a blank canvas and he projects a rose on the canvas, and you see this great shadow of it, and takes out some scissors and starts clipping off the petals of this flower, and then eventually, as he cuts off the rose, there's a blood that smears down, the spears,
Wow.
excuse me, smears from on this projected canvas, and it's a bit of a short film. It feels like a horror movie in its own way. It's executed, I believe, in silence. So it checks so many boxes as far as like what a performance can be, you know. But I also love the golden age of magic from say 1850 to 1950, which doesn't have a lot of recorded footage, but performances from people like Houdini or Thurston or Keller that I've read about just seem unbelievably cool, like on a mythical level almost. These levitations, these women being sawn in half at the turn of the last century, and what outrage that caused, and also fascinated with some of the spook show performers that would have been working around the 1930s through the 60s, who were pairing magic shows with horror films, and they were doing these kind of grand guignol
Mhm.
performances on stage, movie theaters, and then they would show the Bride of Frankenstein or whatever. So a lot of it's stuff that you read about and you've seen pictures and stills, but you can't. There's not a real thing. But live in recent years, Derek Delgadio's performance in New York City of In and of Itself has made a tremendous impact on me as far as the idea of self and telling a story through magic, and what he's done is incredible. Um, I think he's really pushed the art form forward, where so many of the magicians today are either keeping it where it is, or they're pushing it backwards by regurgitating ideas that don't come from the heart, or they're not presented in ways that are, to me, fascinating.
Did you ever go to a carnival, sideshows?
Oh yeah, as a kid, I growing up in Burbank in Southern California, the Barnum and Bailey circus would come once a year, and we would go into the tent. It was in a dirt lot up, a few miles from my house, and just like any other kid growing up, it was just so fascinating to see a man on walking a tightrope, or a stilt walkers, or some man walking on a ball, or a woman, you know, uh, wrestling with a tiger or whatever they were. It was all just real fantasy world. But I never for a second thought that I could be associated with that world, because it's my childhood wasn't, my parents were supportive and they were good in many ways, but they weren't like, um there was no show business in my family. So in other words, there was no connection to be like, oh, you could do that, or that's something that if you're interested in, you could you know take a class or learn, or talk to somebody about learning something like that. I discovered all this stuff on my own, and which led to my interest in music, which, okay, I went and traded a surfboard for a bass guitar all on my own, and I learned how to play the Batman theme on with by listening to it 100 times or whatever. So I think I've kind of found myself my way in the arts, in a way that is, I can take a certain amount of pride of doing that, where like, no, I didn't have an uncle who was a television producer who said, "Oh, come and be on my show or write on this," or whatever. It was everything that I've built my career has been from starting at the bottom and working my way up.
And it's interesting how you keep it fresh, because it's hard to keep it fresh. Like
Thank you. It
like
is.
the
It is.
time you went on stage with rollerblades, or maybe making a little twist here or a little twist there. And also I believe it's a very how can I say it, an advantage that you have, that you are a musician, and you know how to work with sound as well, because there are sounds on stage and there are silences on stage, and trying to bring the balance for the crescendos throughout the performance, that's very interesting as well.
Why, thank you. I mean, I wish more magicians or performers were conscious of like the idea of that. Don't get me wrong. There's tons and tons that are, and I gravitate towards those, and we have endless conversations about that sort of stuff. But I think as a general note, magic is really hard to perform. Acting is really hard. It's hard to be a good actor, and to take those two things and put them together and you know, do them at the same time and make it look like you're just making it up for the first time. It's not easy. So then to think about timing and cadence and adding those elements, it's another level that a lot of people I don't think get to or want to get to or can't get to. I don't know.
Yeah, the creative process, when well done, is quite complex.
It really is. I was just having a conversation with a magician yesterday from Sweden, and we were talking about the profound levels of, you know, when you're facing the audience, you've got, whether it's 20 people or 100 or 1,000 or a television cameras, you know, in your faces, to act unnaturally, or to act, excuse me, to act naturally under these unnatural circumstances, and to, you know, to perform things so effortlessly. It's really quite a mind trip, and you've got to sort of be conscious of all these things, you know, deep in your mind, and be comfortable and confident that you're going to have this freedom, you know, to step out of yourself. It is hard. Yeah. I mean, I think it might come very natural to some people. I think for me, it didn't. And because I had to, each thing that I've learned along the way has been a learning lesson, and something I've had to look at and go, oh, okay, I need to sort of spend some time thinking about this or that, and kind of add to this. And of course, along the way, know where you're coming from, remember your mistakes, and learn from the mistakes of others, and watch people that are great and go, why is that person so effortless and great and beautiful to watch, and this person clumsy and tense and tight, and they get the words out, but you don't believe what they're saying. You know, as I'm referring to actors here a lot, you know, you can see that there's elements that are blocking them from that sort of freedom. And so I think I just really deeply study this stuff, and I've got a pretty profound interest in performance and the sort of science behind it, or pseudoscience, or whatever.
Well, it is a craft because you have to build an atmosphere.
Yes.
If our audience ever saw you perform, if not, we're going to leave a bunch of, of links around so that you can know more about Rob Zabrecky's work. It's interesting because you take over in the first 5 seconds. And after those 5 seconds, if you didn't take over properly, the audience is lost forever. So we see you on stage, that the way you present yourself, the way you command the silence and the attention, and all these things that are the way you invite us, audience, to come into your room, your space, that sacred space of the stage. And you keep us there, but we are like peeking behind the curtain what you're doing. And that sensation that you produce in your audience is, I want to send you flowers. Really, it's amazing. It's amazing how you control everything, the way you present yourself. I mean, you are an amazing man. I mean, you do everything. You sing, you play, you're a splendid dancer. You are a wonderful actor. And even though you are so characteristic in your features, and I mean this as characteristic, not as a judgment or anything, and how you manage to play so many emotions through yourself and project them on stage, all the performances that you have. I mean, it's not just being born with a talent, but all the craft, all the time, all the passion, all the love, all the deliberate little steps to take you where you are. I take my hat off and just a reverence. Really, it's amazing what you do, and you should be better known. You should be better known. I can't get tired of looking for stuff you've made, of going deeper into your work. And I don't know what's next. I was going around, and I saw that you are going to be what is this M for Magic thing?
And for Magic is a magic film that I helped produce about the history of magic in primarily in Los Angeles. It focuses on the Larson family, who have a amazing history in magic, and in 1963 opened the Magic Castle, and it's a film, a feature that I helped kind of get going and worked on, and I'm also in. So that's coming up. One of the
When can
things.
we expect it? Later this year, next year?
A good question. You know, you when you're as a producer or an actor or as a writer, you finish your job and then you send it off, and then things come out when they come out,
Yeah.
and you just hope that they do, because there's so many roadblocks, and as you know, it's so hard to get anything done, and there's always so many obstacles to get to where you're trying to get to. That who knows?
What fascinates you now?
Oh wow. Um, that's interesting. What fascinates me now? Well, I think more than ever, I've been aligning myself with the phases of the moon, and trying to align my sort of spirituality and in connection with the way forward, and how to structure my month based on what's going on with that beautiful little ball of light in the sky that comes out at night. Um, and I think that's helped me make decisions where I would try to push things, to have less control. That fascinates me, to kind of let life just sort of happen amidst this chaos, this absolute madness that we are living in right now, especially here in the States, where the feeling of uncertainty has never been more heightened uh, than the past few months. So to sort of keep calm in my own mind and try to just look forward to these next few ideas, these next few projects. So I don't. That's always been the case for me. I'm always looking at, well, what's the next thing that I'm working on? What how am I going to accomplish this next thing? But I think on a larger scale, just sitting back and knowing that I've had, after talking to you, especially today, I'm reminded that I've had a kind of a long career in show business. Sometimes to step back and look at it and go, wow, what a strange world I've kind of put together and created. And although, yeah, you're right. I mean, I don't have the biggest audience for what I do. It's it's a niche thing, and I'm proud of it, and I'm happy, and it's allowing me to sit here and talk with you now on a Thursday afternoon, um, when I could, be doing any number of jobs. This is what I choose to do, is be a performer, and so I feel like I measure my success by that. And I don't know. I try to find the best in people and see the good in others and help people when I can, and see that they succeed as well in what they're trying to dream up. That's fun. That's uh, very satisfying, and that fascinates me. And I was watching the careers of others and being of service and of help. Maybe that comes from not having children or something, where I want to kind of reach out and see the progress that's to come with others. That's always kind of cool.
Any advice you give to young people who are looking at what you do and saying, I want to be like him? Any advice? Anything you feel it would have changed your uh path or something if you have heard it?
Not really. I mean, we have to find our own paths. There's no shortcuts. There's no magic word. There's no magic wand you can wave over something to push it forward. Good stuff takes time. It really does. And I have said this, and would say to, uh, and I say young, meaning they can be 90 years old and still learn. This could be their first week in magic, so they can be a young performer, someone that can be much older than you or I or whatever. But I would say embrace your inner weirdo. The weird thoughts that are inside, this most strange, obscure thing you think, I couldn't possibly write that into my act or painting or dance or whatever. Those are the things that we take risks on. It's an emotional risk, and those would define us. Maybe that's why you're talking to me right now, because I took so many emotional risks. and those things define me tomorrow. What I'm risking today is going to be the next thing that next week, next year, next month. So I'm just going to go, oh, that guy, I just learned about this guy. He did this cool thing. And then they'll see that there's a pattern of 40 years or something of doing that. But I think always embracing your inner voice, your inner weirdo, those obscure, strange thoughts are often the best things that will project you into producing provocative, interesting art.
What do you want to be remembered for? How do you want to be remembered?
Gee, I haven't really thought about that. I think being remembered as somebody who was somebody who took creative chances, did what they felt was right from their core, produced some interesting art, and did it through a level of kindness and empathy, and somebody who did it their way and did it fairly, did it right. But thank you. I'd like to say, express gratitude for having the chance to share my journey, my unorthodox, strange ride in show business, and talk a little bit about what I do, because it's in some ways it reaffirms who I am and reminds myself that it has been an unusual path and will, continue to be. And now maybe I'm going to go embrace my inner weirdo even more and come up with something really strange for my next act.
Thank you very much. Where can we find you?
Well, I can be found by searching the internet. I think you would find me on a website called officialzabrecky.com. I post not regularly, but I have tracked my creative life on Instagram at Rob Zabrecky. And I've got some nice posts up there that I'm pleased with. And, I do a lot of performances and shows. Those things often get tagged and are available to look at. And then the Facebook occasionally, but I'm not a massive social media person. I could probably be further along if I was. But I find that stuff just tangles my mind up sometimes with noise and chaos that I don't. It's not part of the creative process, so I don't tend to spend a lot of time on it.
Well, thank you very much. Oh, no, sorry. You were saying.
Oh, but that's where you asked where it can be found, and I sort of went off on a slight tangent. So yeah, that's where you find me on the internet.
Just type down the name. Well, thank you very much. Gracias a todos por acompañarme en esta entrevista con Rob Zabrecky. Los subtítulos abajo, comentarios, ahí los espero, y en la descripción van a encontrar todos los links a su trabajo. Thank you very much, Rob.
You're very welcome.